Throughout history, strange events have occurred that no one has been able to explain. From people vanishing under suspicious circumstances, close encounters with unidentified flying objects, to ships and planes that vanished without any explanation. Despite thorough investigations, many of these events have never been solved, and they continue to baffle experts today. Number 5. Usually, when someone reports that they saw a UFO, they're met with skepticism. And it's for this reason that a rocket propulsion engineer by the name of Donald Shrum decided to remain anonymous for decades, only revealing his true name to the public in 2015, 51 years after his encounter with a group of strange humanoid creatures in the woods of Cisco Grove in California. On the 4th of September of that year, Shrum and two of his friends, Tim Trueblood and Vincent Alvarez, were camping in the Tahoe National Forest while they were bow hunting for deer. The group had decided to split up, and after a long night of stalking deer, Shrum decided to get some sleep by climbing a tree and fastening his belt to a branch. At around 9:15 p.m., he settled in the tree and was preparing to get some shut-eye when he noticed a strange light in the sky. At first, he thought it was a helicopter that had been called to find him, but when he climbed down from the tree and lit 3 fires to get the pilot's attention, he knew something was wrong. He had managed to get the craft's attention, but it was approaching him at a dangerously high speed, and inexplicably, it was completely silent. He also noticed that it seemed to absorb the light around it, and having worked with propulsion systems for many years, he became convinced that it was no man-made craft. Though he couldn't see them, he realized that the craft's occupants seemed to be studying him, and he climbed back into the tree in hopes that they would lose interest. But as he settled in the tree once more, the craft only got closer, and he saw a set of 3 windows on its side. He managed to get a good look at the craft, estimating it to be around 150 feet long, but it was of such a dark color that he couldn't make out any specific details. A few moments later, one of the windows opened, and a smaller craft appeared before flying a short distance away and settling on a nearby hill. He then became aware that something or someone was walking through the bushes towards him, and to his surprise, a strange humanoid figure appeared. He stated that where the creature's face should have been, there was only darkness, and he could just make out a set of large black eyes. This creature was soon joined by a few others, all of whom seemed fascinated by the trees and the foliage around them. He started hearing a strange noise which he described as similar to an owl's hooting, and it became apparent that they were communicating with the large ship, since they seemed to be carrying out relayed instructions. But things only got creepier from here. A few moments later, a larger figure emerged from the brush and walked towards the tree where Shrum had once again secured himself with his belt. Upon closer inspection, he noticed that it looked like a robot of some kind, as it was a metallic color, and as he watched, the creature lifted its hand towards its mouth before producing a strange white mist that caused him to lose consciousness. When he came to, he was hanging from the tree, and the robotic creature attempted to knock him out with the gas again, but he drew his bow and fired, causing the creature to stagger backward with sparks flying from the arrow's impact. But the robot was soon joined by another, and together they produced a more potent version of the mist that rendered him unconscious once more. Before he passed out, though, he saw that the 2 figures were standing face to face, and that a strange white light was moving back and forth between them. When he woke up this time, there was no sign of any of the creatures, or the craft that they had arrived in, and he quickly climbed out of the tree before making his way back to the safety of the camp, where he told his 2 friends what he had seen. He reported the unnerving incident to the Air Force, but they seemed less than interested, telling Shrum that he had probably been the victim of a prank. When he returned to the site a few days later, though, he found tire tracks leading up to the site, which had been cleared of any evidence, and all he could find were the marks left behind by a cleanup crew. Number 4. There may have been many legendary diamonds discovered throughout history, including the Cullinan diamond, which was found in Pretoria, South Africa, and is considered to be the world's largest rough diamond ever found. After its discovery, it became part of the crown jewels, where it remains to this day. Another impressive stone, also found in the Cullinan mines, is the Blue Moon of Josephine diamond, which is valued at around $48 million. And today it's in the possession of Joseph Lau, a Chinese billionaire. Then there's the Regent diamond, which is said to be unique since it's a white diamond with blue undertones. It's currently housed in the Louvre in Paris, but had been in the possession of royalty including kings, queens, and dukes before being sent to Paris in 1997. But one diamond, called the Florentine, is considered by many to be just as impressive, if not more so, due to its unique coloring and cut. The stone is the stuff of mystery today, as its whereabouts are unknown, and experts can only speculate as to where it eventually ended up. It's also known by other names, including the Austrian Yellow Brilliant, the Austrian Diamond, the Grand Duke of Tuscany, and the Tuscan. The stone weighed around 137 carats, and was unique in that it had a pale yellow color with hints of green when held in the light. It's cut into a double rose shape, resulting in 9 sides, each of which reflected light brilliantly, and considering that it has 126 facets, it's a dazzling piece indeed. The diamond's origins are ambiguous, as one account claims that it was discovered on the Deccan Plateau in the Indian subcontinent, while others believe it was found in Golconda, while work was underway in the Kollur mines in South India. Either way, it was definitely discovered in India, but the exact location is debatable. Some historians believe that in 1477, it belonged to Charles the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy, and that it was stolen from him after he lost his life on the battlefield at Nancy in France. It's said that the diamond was always on his person as he wore it around his neck in a pendant wherever he went. Some reports claim that it was stolen from his remains by a soldier, who then sold it for a small amount of money since he assumed it was a piece of glass rather than an incredibly valuable diamond. The lucky recipient of the stone was a man named Bartholomew May, who lived in Bern, Switzerland. He then sold it to someone living in Genoa, though it isn't known what the asking price was. Thereafter, it became the property of the Duke of Milan, who then sold it to a financier by the name of Jacob Fugger. From here, the diamond's journey becomes less clear, as it was sold and bought many times, though it's thought that it belonged to Pope Julius II at some point. It finally made its way into the possession of the 3rd Duke of Tuscany, and after his passing, it was inherited by his son, Cosimo II. It was then passed along to his 10-year-old son, Ferdinando II. The stone would remain in the Medici family until the last of their line passed away, after which it was passed on to the new Grand Duke of Tuscany, Francis Stephen. Thereafter, it became part of the Habsburgs' crown jewels, where it was displayed in the Hofburg Museum in Vienna, Austria. At the end of the World War, the diamond was sent to Switzerland, along with the Habsburg family, but here it's believed that someone who knew the family stole it, along with the other Austrian crown jewels. They then fled to South America, where it may have been recut before being sold to an unknown person. But some people believe that the stone remained in Austria until it was stolen by German soldiers in the period leading up to World War II. It's also been speculated that the diamond was then seized by US soldiers, who returned it to Vienna via General Mark Clark. But this is all mere speculation, as the current whereabouts of the Florentine diamond are unknown, and some people believe that it was cut into smaller diamonds a long time ago. It's currently listed as one of the most valuable lost diamonds ever discovered, and it's likely that we'll never learn where it eventually ended up. Number 3. There are many tales throughout history of entire civilizations that seem to vanish into thin air. But in many of these cases, it's eventually revealed that they abandoned their homes due to either famine, natural disasters, or due to being driven out by enemy forces. One such example is the colony of Roanoke that mysteriously disappeared in 1590, after Walter Raleigh attempted to establish the first English settlement in North America, but it ended tragically. The settlers experienced a lot of hardships in their first year on Roanoke Island, and so Raleigh decided to travel back to England in hopes that he would return with fresh supplies and resources, but this wasn't to be. When he reached the island again 3 years later, he found it completely abandoned, and the only clue left behind was the word Croatoan, which had been carved into a nearby tree. The rest of the colony's members were never found, and Raleigh was forced to sail back to England, leaving his family to their unknown fate. Similarly, an ancient civilization known as the Tartessos that lived in Badajoz, Spain, seemingly vanished without a trace. But in this case, archaeologists were able to uncover clues that gave them an idea of who these people were. But it still isn't known how or why they vanished. What is known is that the Tartessos lived in the region around 2,500 years ago, and thanks to items being found at the dig site, it's believed that they had a grand feast before leaving the area for good. Some people believe that the feast was held in conjunction with a massive sacrifice ceremony, possibly because they were trying to appease the gods after falling on hard times, a scenario that would have been hard to imagine for those who lived nearby, as the Tartessos were considered near mythical thanks to their advanced technologies and crafting abilities that included shipbuilding and superior metalwork. The Tartessos' site remained unexplored until it was rediscovered by archaeologists in 1978. And finally, they were able to gather some clues as to what may have happened to cause their disappearance. But with new answers came new questions that are still to be answered. When a survey was conducted at the site in 2014, archaeologists quickly realized it was an important historical site, and they soon started uncovering items that led them to believe that a great feast had taken place while sacrifices were being carried out. In 2017, an archaeologist named Esther Rodriguez Gonzalez discovered the remains of over 50 different animals, including horses, donkeys, cows, and pigs. But there's a good chance that they weren't the only offerings made, as evidence has been found that humans were also sacrificed. Other clues that were uncovered include large bronze cauldrons, plates made out of bone, and the partial remains of a marble sculpture that's thought to have been created in Greece. They were able to learn more about the Tartessos people's construction abilities, as they uncovered structures that were built using a technique that was thought to have only been created many years later by the Romans. Thanks to their superior shipbuilding techniques, the Tartessos people are thought to be the first ever to trade with people on the other side of the Mediterranean Sea, which would have resulted in vast riches. The Greek historian Ephorus wrote that the Tartessos people traded in tin, gold, and copper, with other authors describing their culture as remarkably sophisticated. But this couldn't stop whatever it was that caused them to abandon their land. Some historians think that the coastal areas fell victim to a series of massive earthquakes, and that the resulting tsunamis wreaked havoc on the area. This may have caused them to believe that the gods were angry at them, and hence they held the sacrificial ceremony in an attempt to appease them. When artifacts from these coastal areas were discovered hundreds of miles inland, speculation arose that people from the coast were fleeing further natural disasters, and that they would have been convinced that their sacrifices were rejected by the gods. It's believed that these earthquakes must have been of epic proportions, since the Tartessos went to great lengths to establish an impressive settlement, and that they would have never abandoned their home unless it was absolutely necessary. As archaeologists began uncovering some of the buildings, they became ever more aware of the Tartessos' ability, stating that they had never encountered buildings so sophisticated from that era before. They've also found evidence that after the Great Feast and sacrifice ceremonies were over, the site was intentionally buried before being abandoned. It's believed that they then made their way into the countryside, after which they seemed to vanish off the face of the earth. Some archaeologists think that the site was buried in an effort to protect the buildings from Mother Nature, and to preserve them for a future study. Others believe it was done to conceal the buildings from looters, as the site would have been considered sacred, and that the buried remains were not to be disturbed. But there are still many unanswered questions about Tartessos. No one can be certain whether they planned to leave the area of their own volition or if they were forced to abandon their homes due to natural disasters. The hope is that further study, aided by modern technology, such as ground-penetrating radar, will reveal more about the people who lived in the area and the techniques they used in constructing their buildings. This may also provide archaeologists with further clues as to where they might have gone after the fact, and whether they all traveled to a new destination together or if they split up into groups that settled in new areas. For now, the lives of the Tartessos people remain shrouded in mystery and continue to captivate researchers from around the world. Number 2. The Bermuda Triangle is one of the most mysterious areas on Earth, as it's thought to be responsible for the disappearance of more than 50 ships and airplanes. And to this day, no one has been able to explain why, though many theories have been put forward. In many of these cases, the planes and ships in question are never found, and the people who were aboard at the time remain missing to this day, with some exceptions. But one pilot by the name of Bruce Gernon came face to face with the mysterious Bermuda Triangle and lived to tell the tale. On the 4th of December 1970, Bruce was scheduled to fly his single-engine plane, named the Beechcraft Bonanza, from the Bahamas to Miami, Florida, with 2 passengers, his father and one of his business partners. Bruce had made this particular flight on many occasions, and on a clear day, the trip would take around 90 minutes to complete. But on this occasion, things would turn out a little differently after he had a strange encounter. Being an experienced pilot, Bruce was familiar with all kinds of clouds and whether they were to be avoided or not. And so after taking off from the Bahamas, he climbed to around 10,000 feet before he spotted a small black cloud in the distance. As he approached, the cloud seemed to grow in size, but he still didn't consider it to be dangerous, and so he proceeded to fly through it without any problem. Emerging on the other side, he proceeded to climb a further 1,000 feet before he spotted another dark cloud. But this one was much larger, and he saw no other option than to fly through it. Recounting the experience, Bruce stated that as soon as he entered the cloud, everything went impossibly dark around the plane, and he was baffled since there was no forecast for overcast conditions. A few moments later, the cloud started forming a tunnel, and Bruce could see flashes of light running through it, but he was certain that it wasn't lightning. He felt he had no choice but to push forward in hopes that he would reach the end of the tunnel, but it seemed to go on forever. He attempted to contact the control tower on the ground, but found that he had lost all radio control, and he knew that he would have to negotiate the situation on his own, hoping that he and his passengers would make it out alive. A few moments later, he spotted a light at the end of the tunnel, and just when he thought the ordeal was nearly at an end, he suddenly lost control of the plane. But rather than plunge towards the ground, it kept flying as if it was being piloted by an external force. But still, the opening at the end of the tunnel neared, and about 20 seconds later, his plane emerged on the other side. He noticed that the plane felt almost weightless, but as soon as he regained his bearings, it returned to normal. He immediately contacted ground control, who informed him that he had already reached Miami, and he realized that the trip should have lasted 90 minutes, but had only lasted around 47. Bruce managed to land the plane safely, but when he inspected the plane, he found that he had almost no fuel, and try as he might, he could find no explanation for his encounter. It remains a Bermuda Triangle mystery that has not been solved, and though many theories have been suggested to explain his encounter, none have found any definitive answers. Number 1. We're all familiar with some of the most famous UFO cases in history, the most well-known probably being the Roswell incident that took place in 1947. These incidents are usually well covered by the media, resulting in many theories as to what these objects actually are. But some UFO encounters are not as well known, as they don't receive the same media coverage. This was the case in 1978, when thousands of people witnessed a strange craft crashing into Mount Altair in Bolivia. Witnesses stated that just before the strange cylindrical object struck the mountainside, it started spewing out thick black plumes of smoke, and they believed that the craft was experiencing difficulties resulting in the crash. What followed was a massive sonic boom that was heard 150 miles away, and some people reported the windows of their houses exploding as a result. Others were knocked off their feet by the sheer force of the explosion, and a few moments later, a thick column of smoke started rising from the site of the crash. One witness stated that he could feel the ground shake as the object made impact, and the resulting boom threw him to the ground. He did manage to get a good look at the craft before it crashed, and he described it as having a similar shape to a wine container. The incident was witnessed by 2 police officers while they were conducting patrols in Aguas Blancas. They would report that they saw a bright flash of light in the sky, and when they looked up, they saw an oval-shaped metallic craft falling from the sky, trailing smoke behind it as it descended at high speed. Moments after the object fell from their view, they heard a massive explosion, and also saw the resulting column of smoke. A soccer match was underway just a short distance away, and the entire crowd, which consisted of hundreds of spectators, also saw the strange object as it flew overhead. Players involved in the match would also corroborate their story, and soon speculation began as to what the object could have been. The incident was also witnessed by an engineer who was in the middle of conducting a survey, and he would describe the resulting explosion as the loudest he had ever heard, louder than a crashing meteorite. In an effort to investigate, the Bolivian Air Force sent their own aircraft to the area, and they reported that a rock slide had occurred at the crash site. Attempts were made to reach the site on foot, but thanks to the harsh terrain in the area, only one search party was successful. They were able to locate the object and described it as dull, metallic, and cylindrical, and measured around 15 feet in length. It was also noted to have sustained some damage, but nothing worse than a few dents, which, given the speed at which the impact occurred, is quite remarkable. Some media outlets reported that a meteorite had crashed into the mountainside, despite no official statement being released to confirm or deny this theory. Others believed that it was an extraterrestrial craft that had encountered difficulties upon entering Earth's atmosphere, causing it to crash to the ground. Speculation of an extraterrestrial craft was only further fueled when some newspapers started reporting that the investigation would be taken over by experts from NASA. And when two members of the military conveniently arrived for a vacation, more people became convinced that the object was not of earthly origin. Reports then began coming in that the cylindrical object and the debris around the crash site had been collected by members of the US military, and after doing so, everything was taken to the US aboard an Air Force Hercules cargo plane. But things would continue to get even stranger, as an Argentinian investigator named Nicolas Ojeda reported that a team of investigators had disappeared without explanation while they were at the crash site, and he confirmed that a US cargo plane had transported at least some of the debris back to the US. This claim was further corroborated by a man who spoke to a member of the CIA, and when he inquired what was taken from the site, he was given the answer, no comment. No further explanations were ever given, and to this day, no one can say with certainty what the object was that crashed into the mountain. What is certain, though, is that the crash took place in full view of hundreds of witnesses, none of whom recognized the object as something that they had seen before. Whether it was of extraterrestrial origin, though, remains unknown, and it's a mystery that's still spoken about in Bolivia today. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.